Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. And this is how a phone call, one I never expected and never wanted, flipped my reality upside down 15 years after I thought the worst was over. Elwood. It's about the boy. He knows. And he wants to meet you. That's what she said. After 15 silent years, Maureen, my ex-wife, my betrayer, my ghost, calls me at 7:13 p.m. on a Thursday and drops that bomb. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I'd been. She just said that. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at my cold casserole, heart racing like it hadn't in over a decade. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened but nothing came out. My body forgot how to breathe. The boy? I knew who she meant. I just didn't know what she meant. He couldn't possibly want to meet me. He wasn't mine. At least that's what she told me the night she walked out and never came back. He's not yours, Elwood, she said back then, throwing her suitcase in the trunk. He never was. And I can't do this anymore. That sentence haunted me for years. Not because of the words, but because of how easily she said them, like canceling a subscription. I never got proof. Never got a test. I wasn't even allowed in the hospital when he was born. Her family made sure of that. Her attorney made sure I stayed far, far away. But now, she says he knows? Knows what? I finally forced out. It's better if we talk in person, she replied. He has questions. And so do you. I hung up. Then I immediately started pacing like I did in those first few months after she left. Back when I still hoped she'd show up and say she made a mistake. That I was enough. Instead, I got 15 years of nothing. No birthday cards. No updates. No closure. Just one call. Now, after I'd finally stopped checking the mailbox for ghosts. And the craziest part? The next morning, I found an envelope in my P.O. box. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a photo. A boy, maybe 14, with my eyes and my awkward half-smile. His hands shoved in the pockets of a hoodie I'd worn when I was his age. I still have that hoodie in a bin in my attic. The back of the photo read, "He's yours in more ways than one." I dropped it, and that's when I knew. This wasn't just about a call. This was a confession 15 years in the making. And I wasn't ready for what she was about to say next. I didn't go to work the next day. Couldn't. My body was present, but my mind had vanished into the black hole that was that photo. His face wouldn't leave my head. The resemblance was terrifying, not just to me, but to someone I hadn't thought about in years. My brother. My older brother, Francis. The one who died in that motorcycle accident when he was 25. The one Maureen had only met once, at our wedding. The more I looked at the photo, the more the boy's face started shifting in my mind. My eyes, Francis's cheekbones, my mother's brows. It was like the universe was mocking me. It made no sense. It wasn't possible. Unless, no, I wouldn't go there. Not yet. But the thought stuck to the inside of my skull like wet wallpaper. Around noon, I called Maureen back. The number worked, but she didn't answer. I texted, "I got the photo. We need to meet. Today." To my surprise, she responded a few minutes later with an address. A diner on the edge of town. The same one we used to stop at after grocery shopping on Sundays. The one where we first argued about baby names. When I walked in, she was already there, nursing a black coffee like no time had passed. She looked different, not older, just worn. Like a version of herself pressed through grief and silence. She gave me a small nod, like we were old co-workers, not ex-spouses bound by betrayal and 15 years of avoidance. I sat down. She slid another envelope across the table. "Before you ask questions, read what's inside." I opened it. It was a letter, not handwritten but typed. The first line punched harder than anything she could have said face to face. "The boy you thought wasn't yours, he is, but not in the way you think. And I need you to know everything before he finds you himself." My throat went dry. I skimmed the next paragraph. It was a confession, one I never saw coming. She hadn't just lied to me. She had hidden a secret that involved not just infidelity, not just betrayal, but someone who should have been sacred to both of us. someone who was no longer alive to answer for what happened. And suddenly I understood why she looked so hollow. This wasn't about cheating. This was about something far worse. And the next words out of her mouth made the floor drop beneath me. Elwood, Francis wasn't just your brother. The sentence sat between us like a ticking bomb. I stared at Maureen, blinking, waiting for her to flinch, for her to laugh, for her to admit it was a cruel joke. But she didn't. She just looked at me, calm, hollow, as if she'd already replayed this moment 1,000 times in her head. You need to be more specific, I said finally, the words scraping out of my throat. Because that makes no sense. She took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking now. Francis and I, we had history before you. Brief, stupid. It was a one-time thing, before you and I even got serious. You never knew because he swore me to silence. He told me it would break you. I shook my head. No, you met him at our wedding. She looked up at me with tired eyes. That's when you think I met him. The diner felt too quiet. My thoughts were louder than the clinking of silverware. It was like I was watching myself from across the room. I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't feel the table. I couldn't feel the ground. We were together for a few weeks, she continued, voice trembling. But he disappeared. Then you came along. You were kind, safe. I needed that. I convinced myself it didn't matter. My palms were sweaty now. So the kid. I didn't know I was pregnant when I married you, she said. By the time I found out, it was too late. I tried to convince myself it was yours, that maybe the timing lined up. But deep down, I always knew. I stood up, couldn't breathe. The walls of that diner started closing in. She reached into her purse and pulled out a second photo. This one wasn't of the boy. It was of Francis, young, laughing, sitting shirtless on the hood of his old rusted car. And beside him was Maureen, her hand on his knee, smiling like she belonged there. I tried to erase it, she whispered. But now the boy's asking questions. He found your last name online. He found your photo. And he thinks you're his father. I sat back down. I didn't even realize I had left my feet. Then she said the part that broke me in a way I didn't think was possible. He doesn't know about Francis. And if you don't tell him the truth, I think he's going to find out on his own. He's already coming here, Elwood, this weekend. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leave. But most of all, and this is the part one hate admitting, part of me still wanted to meet that boy. Even if I was never supposed to be his father. Even if he was born from a betrayal between the only two people I ever truly trusted. Because some ghosts don't stay dead. Especially when they look exactly like you. The next 48 hours passed like a fog I couldn't escape. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just kept walking in circles in my apartment, holding that photo of Francis and Maureen like it was some cursed artifact. It felt like I had stepped into someone else's life. Or maybe like I had finally woken up from the lie I'd been living and realized the truth had been waiting in the dark the whole time. I kept thinking about the boy. What did he look like in person? What did he believe about his past? Did he think I'd abandoned him? Did he even know Maureen and I had once been married? The questions multiplied by the hour, but there was one that screamed louder than the rest. Why me? Why now? After all these years of silence, did she bring this to me? Dump this guilt and confusion into my lap as if I were some unfinished business. Saturday came, and with it, a knock on my front door. I wasn't ready. I hadn't prepared myself mentally, emotionally. I hadn't even cleaned the living room. But I knew it was him. I didn't have to look through the peephole. When I opened the door, there he was, taller than I expected, slim, nervous. He was holding a wrinkled folder in one hand and a half-open backpack slung over the other shoulder. His eyes locked with mine, and for a moment we both froze, like seeing ourselves in two different timelines. "You're Elwood, right?" he asked. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. "I think you knew my mom, Maureen? She said we should meet." He didn't call me Dad. He didn't assume anything. It was clear Maureen hadn't told him the full truth. Just enough to lead him to my doorstep. And now we were both standing there in the tension of everything unsaid. I invited him in. He sat on the edge of the couch like he didn't know if he was welcome, and honestly, I didn't know if I was either. He said his name was Nolan. Said he was looking for answers. Said his mother had been quiet most of his life, and now she was sick of hiding things. I asked him if he'd ever heard of Francis. He said no. And that's when the war started in my chest. Do I lie and protect what's left of my brother's memory? Or do I destroy the illusion this kid has lived under his whole life? He opened the folder and slid something across the coffee table. It was a printout of an old article. A car crash. The headline read, "Local man killed in late-night wreck. No foul play suspected." "I think this was my father," Nolan said. "I found it tucked inside one of my mom's books. His name was Francis Duran. That's your last name too, right?" I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. He didn't need a DNA test. He was digging through the past on his own. And if I didn't act fast, he was going to uncover something that neither of us was ready to handle. I sat there frozen while Nolan stared at me, waiting. My brother's face was staring back at me from a yellowed news clipping, and the boy who carried his blood was sitting in my living room, asking questions he didn't know were dangerous. Could have lied. Maybe I should have. But I didn't. My silence was loud, and he heard everything I wasn't saying. "You knew him, didn't you?" he asked quietly. "Francis Duran. You were related." "I did," I finally said, voice barely audible. "He was my brother." Nolan's eyes widened for a second, then narrowed like he was doing math in his head. "So, does that make you my uncle?" I nodded slowly. There it was. The truth scratched the surface, and now there was no going back. He leaned back on the couch, exhaled sharply, then stood up and started pacing the room. He didn't speak for a full minute, but when he did, the question burned right through me. Why did my mom lie about it? Why didn't she ever tell me who he was? Who you were? I had no good answer. What could I say? That she was scared? That she was ashamed? That Francis died before he ever had the chance to be a father, and she decided I was safer left out of it? All of it sounded like weak excuses. "She had her reasons," I mumbled. "That's not good enough," he snapped, turning to face me. "I've been asking her for years. She always told me my dad was complicated, that he wasn't around. But he wasn't some random guy. He was your brother. That's not just complicated, that's sick." I flinched, but he wasn't wrong. I'd been just as blind as he had. I didn't know about the affair until years later. I didn't know that the night she told me the baby wasn't mine, she had already buried that truth under another one. Francis was gone, dead, just like the answers Nolan had been chasing. "He wasn't a bad person," I whispered. "He just made a lot of mistakes." "So did she," Nolan replied coldly. "And I'm the result." He sat back down and rubbed his hands over his face. He looked older than 15. Too tired for someone who should be worrying about math tests and crushes, not secret families and dead fathers. "I don't want anything from you," he finally said. "I just want to know the truth. All of it. Not the edited version she gave me. The real one." I hesitated, then reached for the drawer where I'd kept Francis's letters, the ones he'd written to me before he died. Most of them I never opened. I hadn't had the stomach. But maybe Nolan did. Maybe it was time someone finally read them. As I placed the bundle in his hands, he looked up at me and asked one more question. "Did you ever forgive her?" I couldn't answer, because I hadn't even forgiven myself. Nolan didn't open the letters right away. He just held them in his lap, carefully running his fingers over the string I'd tied them with years ago, like he was afraid they might fall apart if he blinked too hard. I remembered when I first got them. Francis had mailed them one by one in the months before his accident, but I never opened them back then. I wasn't ready, not after what he'd done. They stayed sealed in that drawer, aging quietly, like guilt preserved in paper. Now they were in his son's hands. Nolan eventually untied the string and pulled out the top letter. It was dated 3 months before Francis died. He read the first few lines silently, his brow tightening. Then, without looking up, he said, "He talks about you. A lot." I stayed quiet. He said you were the only person he ever looked up to, that you carried things he was too weak to face. Nolan's voice cracked. He knew what he did, and he hated himself for it. My chest clenched. I didn't want sympathy for Francis. Not then. But hearing it from Nolan made everything heavier. The boy wasn't just looking for answers. He was searching for something to anchor his entire identity. And the letters weren't giving him peace. They were handing him a legacy of regret. He kept reading. The next letter mentioned Maureen. She said she chose Elwood, that she was scared of what being with me would mean. I didn't fight her. Maybe I should have. Maybe the kid wouldn't grow up in a mess if I had been braver. That sentence made Nolan fold the letter and drop it beside him like it burned. He knew about me. He didn't just run off. He chose to disappear. I tried to explain. Francis was never good with responsibility. He panicked. And when he crashed that night, he wasn't running from you, he was running from the whole damn thing. Himself included. Nolan looked at me, eyes glazed with something between anger and grief. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Because I didn't know how, I said. Because no one told me I'd still be paying for their mistakes 15 years later. He reached for another letter, but I stopped him. There's one more thing, I said. Something your mom didn't include in all this. He stared at me, jaw clenched. She didn't just walk out on me back then. She made me sign something. An agreement. Said I couldn't contact you. Said it was best for everyone. I didn't fight it. I was broken. Nolan sat back like I'd punched the wind out of him. Everything I've ever known, he said, was built on people choosing silence. The room felt colder, quieter. Then he stood up, clutching the letters. I'm going to finish reading them, he said. And when I do, I'm going to decide whether I want anything to do with either of you ever again. He left without another word. And I was left with nothing but the echo of a door shutting on a truth 15 years too late. 3 days passed without a single message from Nolan. I checked my phone every hour, reread our short thread of texts like they might suddenly say something different. But there was nothing. The silence this time felt worse than before. Not just because it was quiet, but because now I had something to lose again. And that was never part of the plan. I had trained myself to live without expectations, without attachments. But Nolan's visit changed that. It opened up a space I didn't know I'd left hollow. Then, on the 4th day, someone knocked on the door. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd come back. Maybe the letters had softened something. Maybe he was ready to talk. But when I opened it, it wasn't Nolan. It was Maureen. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Hair tied back hastily. Makeup smudged beneath her eyes. Hands clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped in like she still had a right to. I need to talk to you, she said quickly. Something's wrong. I stood there, stunned. I hadn't seen her since the diner. Honestly, I didn't expect to ever see her again. It's Nolan, she continued. He's missing. Those 2 words collapsed everything. What do you mean missing? I asked. He left the house the day after he saw you, took his bag, some money from the kitchen drawer, and just vanished. He hasn't answered my calls, hasn't been at school, hasn't contacted any of his friends. My heart was pounding. You didn't report it? I did. But they say he's old enough to leave voluntarily. They're treating it like a teenage rebellion. But it's not. He left a note. She handed me a crumpled paper. The handwriting was rushed, messy. I need time. I don't trust either of you. You both built lies and left me in the middle. Don't look for me. I'll come back if I ever feel like it. I read it 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to say this was her fault, that I had tried to stay away like she asked, and now this kid was walking through the fallout of all our sins. But instead I said nothing, because I knew my silence was part of the damage too. She looked at me with bloodshot eyes. If he doesn't come back, Elwood, I won't survive it. You don't know what it's like. Yes, I do, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I meant. I've been surviving it for 15 years. She turned away, covering her face with both hands. Please, she said through her fingers. Help me find him. If you still have anything left in you, help me bring him home. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, I said yes. Not for her. Not even for Francis. But because maybe this was the only way to stop that boy from becoming another ghost we'd all pretend didn't haunt us. It was almost midnight when I heard the knock. A slow, hesitant tap-tap, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. I'd been sleeping on the couch again. Not because I was expecting anything, but because I couldn't bring myself to climb into a bed with this much noise in my head. I got up slowly, half afraid it was Maureen with another crisis, or worse, the police. But when I opened the door, there he was. Nolan. Soaked from the rain, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes puffy like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked up at me with that mixture of confusion and fear I'd seen in the mirror too many times. I didn't know where else to go, he finally said. I stepped aside without a word, and he walked in like it was the most natural thing in the world. He dropped his bag near the door and stood in the center of the room, dripping onto the hardwood, waiting for me to react. Your mom's been worried sick, I said gently. I've been worried too. I know, he said. I needed space. I needed to think without being pushed, without being told what my story is supposed to be. I nodded. Did you find what you were looking for? He didn't answer right away. Then he pulled something from his jacket pocket, the last letter from Francis. It was folded so tightly it looked like it had been clenched in his fist for hours. I finished the letters, he said. The last one, he talked about you, said you were the better man, that if he didn't make it, he hoped you'd tell me the truth. I sat down. So did he? I don't know what I want yet, Nolan said slowly, but I think I want to know you. That sentence felt like oxygen after years underwater. We stayed up until 3 a.m. talking, not about Francis or Maureen or the past, just about books, music, favorite foods, stupid things. Nolan told me he played bass guitar, that he hated sports, that he wanted to be something that didn't have to live in anyone's shadow. And I listened, really listened, not like I was owed anything, but like I was being given a second chance at something I didn't think I deserved. In the morning, Maureen came by. She cried when she saw him. He let her hug him. No shouting, no breakdowns. Just quiet forgiveness or maybe something like it. He didn't go home with her. He asked to stay with me for a while. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt like the silence in my apartment meant something different. Not loneliness, but hope. Thank you for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever experienced a long-lost truth crashing back into your life, whether through a letter, a phone call, or a person, share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how your past surprised you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story like this one. We'll see you next time.